Okay, you ready? Good morning. This hearing will come to order. Thank you all for coming. Before we begin today's joint hearing of the Subcommittee on Contracting and Workforce and the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations, I'd like to thank our witnesses for taking the time to share their insights with us today and look forward to their testimony. In 2016, our federal government spent $90 billion on construction, an industry that is vital to rebuilding our nation's crumbling and aging infrastructure. Our agencies must have agile, transparent, and fair processes in place in order to ensure high-quality structures are built at a reasonable cost. Construction is one particular industry where changes are particularly prevalent and flexibility is crucial. Agencies should be capable of swiftly adapting to changing conditions without engaging in a completely new and lengthy acquisition process. Issuing contract modifications through the use of formally authorized and documented change orders is one way to accomplish this task. In contracting, a certain degree of reasonable delay is expected when changes are made. However, this becomes inexcusable when federal agencies are unwilling to formally execute change orders and fail to pay for work that has been completed for months or even years. During this waiting period, small contractors are often left to finance new work out of pocket. Some of these expenses include paying employee salaries, taxes, building materials, renting expensive machinery, and other costs a small construction firm must assume. Unfortunately, this creates untenable situations and can result in financial distress and, in some cases, bankruptcy. Another common problem occurs. Contractors are directed to perform change order work without following proper notice and authorization procedures. If change order work is directed without following protocol, contractors may not get paid even for work they complete. With the added pressures of staying on schedule and not wanting to poison the relationship between the parties, small contractors must choose between working without a guarantee of payment or risk contract termination for non-performance. Faced with this impossible decision, small contractors often decide to go ahead and do the work. This issue is not unique to small firms, however. Large firms have the flexibility and capital to bear extended periods of time waiting for change order payments. In contrast, smaller operations require a stable and predictable cash flow to replenish their limited working capital. Many small contractors rely on bank loans and lines of credit to bridge the gap, raising the risk of bad credit or worse. When resources are tied up on unprofitable projects, small contractors are unable to seek new work. When multiple change orders are delayed, the impact is further compounded. By engaging in these poor change order practices, agencies end up struggling with small construction contractors. We need to make it equitable for small businesses to work with the government and reduce these barriers that hurt or dissuade small businesses from working with government contracts. I hope through this testimony of our witnesses, we can learn more about this issue and discover ways to prevent this unfortunate circumstance. I do look forward to the discussion today. I'd now like to yield time to the ranking member, Ms. Murphy, for her statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For several decades, the federal government has relied on the private construction industry to build and repair infrastructure for its day-to-day operations. Accordingly, a thriving small business industrial base has become essential to the U.S. economy and to our national security. However, it is well documented that government contracts are less than perfect when awarded. As we will hear today, more needs to be done to reduce the burdens imposed on small construction firms due to administrative delays. During performance of a contract, many changes may be required to fix inaccurate specifications, react to new circumstances, or modify the work to better meet agency needs. A change order is a unilateral written order issued by a contracting officer directing the contractor to make a contract modification. Currently, such directives can be made with or without the contractor's consent. The ability of federal agencies to make such unilateral decisions has led to persistent problems in which agencies fail to follow the proper procedures to issue change orders. Agencies routinely delay the approval process for change orders or bundle them to ease the administrative burden on contracting officers. This committee is concerned that such actions have been taken without sufficient consideration of the consequences for small construction businesses. Agency delays can create significant financial burdens on contractors. Due to the nature of construction projects, processing a change order can slow down other parts of the project, jeopardizing the ability of contractors to meet their obligations. Firms are often left with little choice but to comply with changes without receiving formal approval of the change order or a guarantee that they will receive payment. This has created tremendous uncertainty for small contractors that don't have the overhead margins or larger primes and cannot afford to go unpaid for work performed. Without prompt payment, small firms can struggle to meet their payroll, let alone pay their bills. In some of the more egregious cases, businesses have gone over a year without payment for work completed. Although equitable adjustment in the contract price enables a contractor to receive compensation for additional performance costs incurred by contract modification, this option falls short of solving the problem. Requests for equitable adjustments, or REAs, can allow small business construction contractors to afford continuing performance, but any delay means the contractor must assume the cost and hope for payment after the completion of the contract. Numerous policies and protections have been enacted to incentivize small businesses to continue participating in government contracting, but more are necessary to manage the change order process. Small businesses have approached this committee with complaints about the effect of bundling or consolidation of change orders on their bottom line. I hope today's hearing will shed light on these challenges, and I look forward to hearing this panel's feedback on legislation that Congressman Fitzpatrick, Chairman Knight, and I recently introduced to address the issue. Whether it comes to change order delays, reductions in federal procurement staff, or an increase in multiple award contracts, there will always be new issues for small businesses to overcome. We must ensure that the procurement laws evolve with this changing landscape. Doing so is essential not only for small firms and our nation's industrial base, but for the overall health of our economy. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. And this is a joint hearing. So we have the chairman from the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations with us, Chairman Kelly, to have his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. In the Small Business Committee, I thank our Ranking Member Murphy and Ranking Member Adams. We unite in the Small Business Committee, regardless of party, and we're all great advocates for the small business communities that is so important to our economy. I would also like to thank our witnesses for your willingness to testify on the serious problems endangering our small businesses, construction contractors, caused by the actions and often the inactions of federal agencies. As the chairman mentioned in his opening statement, small contractors often find themselves at the mercy of federal agencies while they wait for payment on work that they completed months ago. Unfortunately, many do not know when that payment might be made or if the payment will be made at all. The danger of delayed change orders to small construction contractors was revealed by the Government Accountability Office's study of the Department of Veterans Affairs construction process in 2013. The GAO found change orders took an average of 2 to 3 months to complete from start to finish, and sometimes as long as 6 months. In one instance, the VA halted change order processing altogether for 1 year, leaving small contractors without payment or resolution. In 2013, $41 million in payments to subcontractors from the VA had not been made, leaving 33 businesses in financial distress. Some contractors were waiting for payment for work they completed over 12 months ago, and a few filed for bankruptcy. Because of these issues, small businesses would rather work in the private sector than bid on financially risky and potentially unprofitable government projects. The agencies also suffer from their own poor practices. Projects become less appealing to contractors, which reduces competition. To offset this risk of delayed or non-payment, small contractors will inflate the prices on bids. This forces the agency to accept much higher prices than budgeted. Simply said, change order delays can stretch into years, and cost overruns can reach upwards of tens of millions of dollars. Furthermore, the committee is concerned that agencies may be engaging in unfair negotiation strategies with construction contractors. One such tactic involves delaying multiple change order payments until the end of a project to try to leverage for a better price. Agency may also be forcing small businesses to rely on claims process to litigate their disputes. Small businesses do not have the time or resources to litigate claims and often settle for lesser amounts than owed, rather than face thousands of dollars in legal fees for the potential benefit of being paid pennies on the dollar. I look forward to hearing more from our distinguished panel about whether agencies are in fact engaging in this unfair treatment and what protective measures might be available. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, and we'd like to hear from the ranking member, Ms. Adams, for her comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this valuable hearing, and I thank all of the individuals who are here to testify today. Today's discussion continues our ongoing work to help more small businesses compete successfully in the federal marketplace. As this committee seeks ways to foster small business growth and expansion, we must always carefully consider what's being done to maximize entrepreneurs' participation, including their experience while performing government contracts. One longstanding barrier to small business participation in the federal marketplace has been the practice of bundling contract modifications, which delays the payment to contractors while increasing the risk they take on. When federal agencies group small modification actions together, they reduce the negotiating power of the contract. Now, while we've discussed formal contract changes, informal contract changes are not issued in writing and often result from government conduct, unforeseen impediments to performance, or other factors. Much of the time, they are disputed, leaving the business with costly litigations. These costs hinder the small contractor's ability to perform other contracts and cut into the profits of the firm. Considering the prevalence of this problem, it's vital that we ensure the SBA is doing everything possible to intervene in unnecessary bundling by giving them more power to do so. This raises a number of important oversight questions, including whether the SBA has sufficient staff to monitor contract actions during performance and is truly privy to agency actions that negatively impact small businesses generally. Because of the nature of the work, construction contracts most often have informal changes. This leads to delays associated with recognizing them as official and receiving compensation for them. As other members have mentioned, this delay greatly affects the capital available to small construction contractors to cover the cost of suppliers or the proper bonding. Often, small businesses do not have the capital to support large bonds that they need to participate in the federal marketplace. This difficulty is exacerbated when bundled change orders increases the original contract price, thereby requiring a larger bond. Given the delays associated with bundling modifications, that potential increase in bonding could cause a small contractor to not be able to complete performance on the contract. And in other cases, small contractors avoid bidding entirely, which diminishes the pool of qualified participants. This committee must examine how well SBA rulemaking process functions to boost small businesses' ability to compete for federal contracts and protect them when completing performance. Mr. Chairman, this committee has a long track record of working in a bipartisan manner, particularly when it comes to procurement issues. It is my hope that we can continue that tradition to further small businesses' role as successful federal contractors. It is all the more critical that this committee and the SBA work to remove barriers that prevent small firms from successfully performing federal work and getting paid for all of the work done. So I look forward to hearing the witnesses' perspectives today on how we can best accomplish that task, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, and I firmly agree that this is one of those committees that is a bipartisan effort to try and make it so that we get our small businesses to work. Our small businesses can create opportunities, and we can have a robust economy. So I'm going to go through the rules here real quick. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that they submit it for the record. The lights in front of you are kind of our stop lights. So as it goes green, you have 4 minutes to give your presentation. When it goes yellow, you have a minute to kind of wrap it up, and when it's red, you're wrapped up. So we're pretty easy around here. But if you can kind of follow that, that would help everyone. And we stick to the 5 minutes up here too with our questions. So I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Mr. Edward Lisle. He serves as the co-chair of the Federal Contracting Group at the law firm of Cohen, Siglias, Seglius, Palace, Greenhall, and Furman, and as a shareholder and member of the firm's board of directors. His practice focuses on federal contracting, construction law, construction litigation, and he also counsels clients in all aspects of small business procurement. Mr. Lisle has appeared before this committee in the past, testifying on challenges facing small business construction contractors, and we thank him and welcome him back today. Our second witness is Mr. Michael Andy Brown. Mr. Brown is the Vice President of Glen Mar Construction Incorporated, a woman-owned and service-disabled, veteran-owned small business construction firm. Thank you very much. He has over 18 years of experience in the commercial and industrial at-risk construction market and in government contracting. Glen Mar holds construction contracts with agencies including the Department of Veterans Affairs, Army Corps of Engineers, and the General Services Administration. Mr. Brown will be testifying today in his capacity as the co-chair of the Small Business Committee on the Federal and Heavy Division of the Associated General Contractors. We look forward to his testimony. And now, since we've shuffled chairs back and forth, I'd like to go to the ranking member to introduce Mr. Long.
It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Greg Long, CEO of Long Electric Company in Napa, California. Mr. Long is testifying on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association. Mr. Long has been an electrician since 1979. He established Long Electric Company in 1990, which now employs dozens of workers. The firm serves customers in various markets, including biotechnology and pharmaceutical facilities, data centers, wineries, education facilities, and commercial and industrial facilities. In 2015 and 2016, Mr. Long was unanimously elected to serve as the council chair for Electri, NECA's educational foundation. He has also served as a representative for the Council for the Electrical Contractors Trust of Solano and Napa counties, and as chair for the Electri Program Review Committee. Welcome, Mr. Long.
Thank you very much. And our final witness is Ms. Colette Nelson. She is testifying today on behalf of the Construction Procurement Coalition, which includes 14 national trade and professional organizations, including the American Subcontractors Association. Ms. Nelson is the Chief Advocacy Officer of the association, and in her 30-plus years with the association, she has been involved in most of the major issues impacting the construction industry. We're pleased to welcome Ms. Nelson to the committee. We look forward to your testimony. I can tell you that Chairman Kelly and I are here to have a robust and aggressive program. We're not just here to look pretty, as Mr. Kelly and I do. We are to actually build a program that can be put into law that can help small businesses, and I know I speak for the entire both committees that is the goal. So with that, we will start with Mr. Lisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, the crux of my practice centers around the representation of construction contractors that perform work for the federal government, many of whom are small. So I'm very familiar with the issue that we are here to discuss today, which is the problems associated with government delay in issuing contract modifications or change orders. I thank members of the Joint Subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. If you travel to Washington, D.C., as I do, from Philadelphia on the train, and you take a cab from Union Station toward the White House, if you look across the sky, you will see that it's littered with cranes, and those cranes sit on construction projects, and as you make your way toward the White House and you stop in front of one of those construction projects, you will see teams of people working, going up and down ladders, pouring concrete, setting steel, operating equipment. You see dust and debris everywhere, and it's quite chaotic. And it's quite chaotic to the construction contractors that are performing, but it is something that they are accustomed to. There are a million risks associated with getting a construction project successfully performed, but a good contractor can manage many of the risks that you see as you drive past. Safety plans are in place to keep workers free from harm. Detailed performance and delivery schedules are in place so that work can be accomplished orderly and timely. But what happens when an unexpected change occurs on a project? What happens, for example, when the contractor realizes that it can't build what's depicted on the plans and specifications, or a situation where the government decides to change the configuration of a room in the middle of performance? That's where the real risk lies for a construction contractor, especially a small one. And they happen all the time. Changes in and additions to scopes of work represent unknown and, to a large extent, uncontrollable risk that can have an enormous impact on the time of performance and cost. The keys to mitigating that risk are to quickly identify the problem, modify the contract as soon as possible so that the performance issues can be addressed, fixed, and paid for. Unfortunately, the government often does not move as quickly as it should, which puts the contractor, especially a small government contractor, in a difficult position. I'll discuss by way of example what can happen in a situation where the government fails to act, but first, let's talk about what should happen. The federal acquisition regulations provide the contractor with guidance on how to proceed when faced with an unexpected or a changed condition. If a contractor runs into such a situation, it generally must notify government and ask for guidance. If the contracting officer responds with a directive to do something that the contractor thinks is over and above what it's required to do by contract under FAR Part 52.243-4, which is the changes clause that is typically included in a government construction contract, the contractor is supposed to tell the contracting officer that its directive will have a cost and time consequence if that's the case. Most of the time, that's precisely what happens. Contractors know when they're going to incur unexpected costs, and it has all the incentive in the world to let the government know that that's the case. The problem is that the timely recognition of the change by the government doesn't happen when it should, or it doesn't happen like it should. FAR 52.243-4 states that once a change is made or occurs, the contracting officer shall make an equitable adjustment and modify the contract in writing. That notion mirrors FAR Part 43.204, which is the FAR section that pertains to contract modifications, which states that the contracting officer shall negotiate equitable adjustments resulting from change orders in the shortest practicable time. So when there are changes, the contracting officer is supposed to recognize them and negotiate an appropriate adjustment. That process does not happen the way that it should. Oftentimes what happens is that the change is not dealt with or recognized at all, and here's how that can play out in reality. I represented a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business on a job for the Department of Veterans Affairs. It was a $6 million renovation project with a performance period of 400 days. There were a myriad of changes that occurred on that project, all of which were obvious. After 700 days of performance and very few change orders issued, and $1 million of his own money spent, this service-disabled veteran gave up and left. His reward for leaving was a termination for default. After 2 years of litigation, we finally settled. The contractor received $960,000 in compensation, and the termination for default was rescinded, but it was too late. The contractor had already closed its doors. That is precisely why we are here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Brown, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify on this important topic impacting small business contractors. I'm Vice President of Glenmar Construction, a family-owned and operated general contractor. As a woman-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned small business, Glenmar performs vertical building construction, seismic renovations, and horizontal construction for federal, state, and local agencies. I currently serve as co-chair of the Small Business Committee for the Associated General Contractors of America. For years, AGC has worked with the House Small Business Committee to establish more protections and better governing policies for America's small business contractors. AGC appreciates and thanks the committee for its continued efforts to help our nation's small businesses. Change orders are an inherent process within the construction industry. Most contractors refer to it as a necessary evil, as a perfect construction project simply does not exist. As with any construction project, unforeseen issues may emerge resulting in a change order. However, in the federal construction industry, change orders have become the bane of all contractors, with significant financial impact to small business. The financial impact has a ripple effect that extends beyond just the prime contractor. It impacts the prime contractor, our subcontractors, and the project as a whole. Delays in processing change orders disrupt cash flow on the project. Cash flow is critical, and in my business, we often view it to be more important than profitability. Without sufficient cash flow, a company will never reach the finish line where profitability resides. When a federal agency fails to timely process and pay change orders, the contractor is left with few options. The contractor can either finance the work to meet the project schedule or stop work altogether. Either option brings real problems to small businesses. To keep the project moving, often small businesses finance the work to complete the project and to avoid unnecessary Miller Act or payment bond claims filed by subcontractors and suppliers. It should come as no surprise that this adversely impacts our overall bonding capacity, which is necessary to pursue additional federal contracts. The ripple effect begins when untimely processing and payment of change orders on one project prevents a small business from competing for additional federal projects. In the past, my company has been unable to bid on projects because our equity was tied up while waiting on payment of change orders. The result is a decrease in competition for federal projects, less efficient use of taxpayer dollars, and fewer opportunities for small business. The current state of change order processing continues to limit the pool of qualified contractors who desire to pursue work in the federal marketplace. Simply put, this has become a barrier to entry. Contractors, especially small businesses, can only finance these projects for so long. Slow payment impacts not only the prime contractor, but all lower tier subcontractors. As an example, I have an active VA project in California. From September through December of 2016, we submitted 15 change orders totaling nearly $500,000. These change orders are undisputed by the agency, but as of today's testimony, some 5 to 7 months later, the work is done, but we've not been paid. Therefore, I've been unable to pay a key subcontractor 100% for the additional work they've completed. As a result, this subcontractor is now under a Department of Labor investigation due to their inability to make timely payments in their employees' 401k plan. This example shows the ripple effects small businesses face because of untimely payment of change orders. Conversely, stopping work due to agency indecision or inaction can lead to negative past performance evaluations. Negative evaluations can adversely impact a contractor's ability to gain future work. And in extreme cases, stopping work could give rise to the agency terminating the contract for default. Either option is detrimental to small business contractors. What I've described in my testimony today is quickly becoming the norm rather than the exception with regards to timely processing and payment of change orders. Just as federal agencies try to avoid poor-performing contractors, contractors in turn try to avoid poor-performing agencies, facilities, and/or government personnel, or at least bids accordingly. To highlight the irony, when we don't pay our bills, our utilities are shut off, our cars are repossessed, our house are foreclosed. However, when the government fails to pay their bills, small businesses go out of business. In closing, I'd like to thank you again for inviting me on behalf of AGC to testify before the committee today. I look forward to answering any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Long, you'll now recognize for 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Chairman Knight, Chairman Kelly, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of both, Ranking Member Adams, and members of both subcommittees for inviting me to testify today on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association, or NECA. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. The subcommittees are to be commended for holding this important hearing to address the critical issues of change orders. My name is Greg Long, and I am the president of Long Electric Company located in Napa, California. Since founding the company in 1990 at the age of 28, our family-owned business has provided electrical construction services on everything, including schools, hospitals, wineries, and various sustainable energy projects, to name a few. We at Long Electric are proud members of the National Electrical Contractors Association, where I've had the honor of serving on a number of industry committees and on the board of directors for the Northern California chapter since 1994. NECA is a nationally recognized voice of the $130 billion electrical construction industry, and our 4,000 members bring power, light, and communication technology to communities across the United States. Change orders are a part of every construction project. That said, our focus as contractors is to complete the job on time and under budget with safety as a priority. When we received a proposed change order, we want to execute and address it in a timely manner. Unfortunately, there's a lot of back and forth negotiating the costs of the change order, direct costs, indirect costs, and consequential costs. A refusal by a contractor to complete a change order, refusal to begin work on a change order until all paperwork is complete, can result in loss of payment, potential lawsuits, and other punitive actions. Because of this, contractors typically proceed with the work under a change directive, requiring them to perform the work even prior to an agreement over the contract price and time. Navigating the challenges presented by change orders often forces us to collide with the very title of this hearing, all work and no pay. Change orders thrive in a realm where contractors have limited leverage in agreeing to the work and even less in extracting payment for the hard work they successfully perform. Often, we are not recouping our costs. In some cases, we are not paid in a timely manner. Sometimes we may not be paid for as long as 18 months or longer. This can be crippling to a small business. According to a study commissioned by Electric International Michigan, performed by Michigan State University, profits for change orders are slim, on average a mere 3%. This also does not account for the litany of risk factors previously identified. To make matters worse, if this payment process is delayed, subcontractors run the risk of not making any profit at all. It can even impact our ability to bid future work due to lack of working capital. Despite these challenges, there are a handful of opportunities to have contractors like myself optimistic. The first is the construction industry growth over the past year. At nearly a 4% increase since March of 2016, the industry is expanding. And secondly, legislatively, is twofold. The first is Representative Bacon's recently introduced bill, H.R. 2350, the Small Business Know Before You Bid Construction Transparency Act of 2017. This legislation aims to address the length of time it takes for the federal government to review, approve, and pay for equitable changes, the validity of payment assurances such as payment bonds, and the timeliness of monthly payments. The second, introduced by Representative Fitzpatrick, Representative Murphy, and Chairman Knight, is H.R. 2594, Small Business Payment for Performance Act of 2017. Offers our contractors the ability to continue work without fear of withheld payments for change order. The bill requires a partial payment of 50% within the time frame specified by the Prompt Payment Act for any additional work. These reforms would streamline the process of bidding on federal construction work and allow subcontractors to adequately address the undue risk they assume when completing change order work. We urge the committee to take positive action on these bills as soon as possible and welcome any and all questioning regarding their intricacies. With all of this in mind, I would like to thank you again for the opportunity to testify before you. NECA applauds the committee's unwavering efforts to examine these important components of our expanding construction industry. We are pleased and remain optimistic at this committee's efforts to address change order concerns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Long. And Ms. Nelson, you are next for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank the members of the committee. For those of you who've worked with the construction industry before, and I'm sure that's all of you in your capacity, you know that sometimes, frequently, we have trouble coming together and agreeing on anything. On these issues, on this change order issue, we are united. And that's why we have this construction industry procurement coalition that I'm representing today. You know, change orders are ubiquitous in the construction industry. I live across the street from the federal courthouse in Alexandria, and as I was getting ready for this hearing last night, I got a notice that the government sewer connection does not line up with the city's sewer connection, which will create a delay in the project and a change order. I'd like to spend my time talking about solutions that the coalition has identified for this problem that we would ask that you consider. So we have several solutions that we have debated and agreed upon. The first would be to provide notice of agency policy and procedures on change orders in the RFP process. This proposal is incorporated in H.R. 2350. And it's a very simple concept. Contractors and subcontractors are bidding on federal projects, sometimes without knowing what they're getting into. As a quick example, on the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency campus outside of St. Louis, a several billion-dollar 5-year project at a recent event to brief small and emerging firms and encourage them to bid. As subcontractors, a question was asked about, does the Corps of Engineers delay change orders until the end of the project? The answer was yes, and some small businesses who would otherwise have considered bidding left the room. They couldn't risk a delay of years for for what will be certainly change order work. The second proposal that we would make would be to establish deadlines for agency responses to requests for equitable adjustment. The Federal Acquisition Regulation sets a deadline for contractors. Contractors have to respond in 30 days. They have to submit their REA in 30 days. The FAR simply says that the contracting agency has to respond in a reasonable amount of time. That's not defined. We would suggest that at least for projects on which small businesses are the prime contractor, that a specific time be set. If we can compile a bid and a proposal in 30 days, certainly the agency should be able to review and approve that within the same amount of time. The third proposal was incorporated in HR 2594, and that would be to require provisional payment of 50% of a request for equitable adjustment. That is a practice in the private sector, and it does not prejudice either the government or the contractor on future claims, but it keeps that cash flowing. So it's payment for performance that if the contracting officer has directed unilaterally the contractor to perform a change, that the contractor can request payment for up to 50% of its actual work on that change. So it keeps that cash flowing. The fourth proposal is to require regular reports on the status of REAs. What we have found is that the REAs go in and get sat on the corner of the contracting officer's desk for the duration of the project. By providing contractors, and thus subcontractors and suppliers, with regular information, perhaps incorporated with the monthly progress payments, that at least the contractors would know when and if payment would be forthcoming. It would have the additional benefit of providing the Congress and other oversight entities information on when those contracting orders are being processed. You know, one thing those of us in management know is that you do what is measured. So this would be an opportunity to measure those approvals. Then I want to add just two more things, some payment transparency things. Anytime the contractor knows what's being done, the better we can perform. So that we have two more proposals. One, to require the government to post in a public environment the prime contractor's payment bond, and secondly, to notify, to provide in a public environment when the prime contractor is paid. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to respond to questions.
Thank you very much. And we will go now to our questions. I will take 5 minutes to start off the questioning, and just a basic question because I think you all hit on it, and we've all worked with contractors in a very small arena, whether working on our house or working in a business or something of that nature. And I know a lot of us have been in just that situation that Ms. Nelson said, that we come up with 50%, they get going on the job, and as the job gets to its completion, then the second payment is made. And that's kind of, you know, I think that's kind of a regular thing that happens with small contractors around the area. So my first question is, what are the reasons that the government gives for withholding $1 million or withholding payments to small businesses that have completed the work, and now they're asking for payment? Is there a reason from the government, or is there just no response? And I'll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The reasoning that contractors will get can certainly vary. It can vary from, I didn't receive all the paperwork that I needed, which oftentimes is not the case. I haven't gotten around to it yet, I'm busy. Oftentimes, what you'll hear is, well, we dispute the basis that there is a change, when very clearly you can demonstrate to them that it is a change. So there's this guise of a dispute that really shouldn't be there.
So there is going to add on to my second question, because we are talking about change orders. If I do a work in my house and I say, you know what, I want a different door than I requested, that is basically a change order right there. I'm asking for an upgrade indoor, and I initial there and say, now I want this door that's going to cost X number of dollars more. And good contractors will do that. And they'll say, okay, well, you acknowledge that you're doing this and you're saying that you're going to pay for this. Is that something that the government or that the subcontractor could require of the government? If we're going through these change orders, then there should be something that goes back and forth. I see a lot of nodding heads going back and forth like this. But is that something that, you know, this committee's looking for answers and things that we don't get to these payments at the end where there's a dispute? And if there's no dispute when the work is done, there shouldn't be any dispute when the work should be paid. But if they don't acknowledge it and they say, yes, there's a change order now, but 6 months later they say, oh, was that really a change order, or did you just do the work that...
I can give you a quick example. I alluded to this contractor that ended up going out of business in my opening statement. In that particular case, there were a series of change order discussions that took place between the government and the contractor. There were 2 weeks' worth of meetings that happened, and at the end of that meeting period, there was a handshake deal about what the cost should be. It was a negotiated agreement. What we found out later was, despite that handshake agreement, the government simply didn't have the money to pay for it. She was then going to try to get the money, and it didn't happen. So what they did was they forced the contractor into a claim situation, litigation, and the contractor never was able to recover from that.
And you know, I'm going to get to another question here, but I'm kind of going down this road because I know a lot of other questions will come about other things. But we're trying to fix something, and you know, I wouldn't shake hands with the government, and I am part of the government. So I think that what we're trying to say is that things have got to be, you know, more concrete in everything that goes for a project, and especially if we're talking about a mammoth project where you might have 90 subcontractors coming in and doing work on a VA situation or building a hospital in Colorado that who knows when that'll get done. You know, it's those kinds of things. I would think that we could do something legislatively. But and lastly, and I will never be the person to say we should collect more data in the government, but I guess I am this time. Is there a data collecting process of this? Everybody's shaking their head like this. No, there isn't. That shows that there are this type of activity that's going on year after year, and we can kind of chart it and say, we didn't pay these subcontractors on time last year at a rate of 17%, and the year before it was 12%. There's no data collecting in that arena, is there, Ms. Nelson?
Mr. Knight, there is a requirement in the Prompt Payment Act to report to Congress on late payments, but these aren't late payments because they're not approved payments.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're gonna move on to Ms. Murphy for her questions.
This question is for Mr. Long. You know, each construction project has its own unique set of factors that help determine the overall cost of the project. For example, a project in Florida would have a different set of conditions than maybe a similar project in New York. Do you think that the change order process allows the agencies to consider the different variables that construction projects face?
I think that a lot of times the proper procedures and protocol does not allow for a lot of issues and impacts with regards to change orders. Period. they're not recognized by all as far as a circumstance we could have in California or if it's in Florida. It could be taken into effect, but in most cases, there's just a lot of, the problem is people are not recognizing the true cost impacts of the change order. And those, again, those could be the direct costs that are pretty obvious, labor, materials, subcontractors, and equipment, or it could be the indirect or consequential costs that you're speaking of. So they're just not recognizing the entire costs and allowable overhead and profit on top of that. That's a major problem, and that's a major excuse, you might say, of these change orders getting delayed. Is the first part of that delay is them recognizing our true costs, followed by then the lack of prompt processing and payment thereof, which is basically handcuffs us in doing business when this is just continual, one after the other, on each project that we are contracted for.
Okay. And so if you've laid out some of these problems that a lot of the similar, like small businesses are experiencing with change orders, is it possible that other industries are also facing the same challenges? And if they are also facing the same challenges, shouldn't the use of consolidation be prohibited for change orders at a certain stage in the performance of the contract?
Do you mean the other trades?
Yes, other industries.
Yeah, it's happening to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have a change order, and it could involve 12 subcontractors in that one change order. It might not be just adding 20 outlets and 40 light fixtures. We could be adding a generator or some mechanical equipment, and there's a lot of people involved in that change order, and it's happening to, like you stated, it's happening all the way down the line. So it's impacting all the industries. They all feeling exactly the same thing.
And Mr. Brown, you had testified to the follow-on consequences or the flow-down consequences of change order delays and the role that this plays in negatively impacting prime contractors and subcontractors. How can this committee work to lessen the financial burden of untimely payments on small construction firms at every level in the contracting process?
The way our subcontract typically is set up, and this is universal, and I'm sure Mr. Long will confirm, we have a pay when paid clause. So if we don't get paid as the prime, the sub doesn't get paid, unless we decide to finance the job for the benefit of the project and the sub. And oftentimes we have to make that call. So yeah, transparency about the process. I would say it's described as consistently inconsistent across the government, across agencies, within agencies, different divisions. You get different answers about why it's being held up. And I think Ms. Nelson noted that it's not late until they've accepted it. So the change order that I described in my testimony this morning, I actually recently had to reach out to VA headquarters to inquire about the status. And coincidentally, that same day, I received a follow-on email saying that the additional funds request had been received. That would have been 7 months to the day. In reading the email string, the agency didn't submit their request until the end of March. I'd already been talking to the contracting head in October about what's the status and was being told it's going through the process.
So real quickly, you all have shared really egregious stories. Are there any particular agencies that are worse than others?
No.
Just in my experience, I will tell you the answer is absolutely yes. I've had my clients, not me personally, but I've suffered through it with them. My clients have had a horrible time with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I unfortunately was involved in that mess in Aurora, Colorado. I represented a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business there, but for the grace of God, we were able to maneuver him through, and he survived. But his $18 million project cost him $32 million. Okay, this is a small business, and when you don't get paid that kind of money, most of the time it doesn't work out very well for you. So that was a VA job. The instance that I described earlier during my testimony, that was a VA job, and the list goes on and on. There are many of them.
I might suggest that frequently the differences are by region rather than by agency. And sometimes it's just by the skill and experience of the contracting officer. One of the problems that we face as over the last several decades as funding for the number and the education of contracting officers or contracting staff for the federal government has deteriorated, their ability to do things that we would like to have done promptly also has deteriorated. So sometimes it's just administrative convenience for an agency to put these requests for equitable adjustments to the side and process them, and audit and process them at the end of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me a couple extra minutes.
Absolutely. And we are graced by the chairman of the full committee. Chairman Shabbat is here, and I'd like to now yield 5 minutes to Chairman Kelly for his questions.
And I'm going to yield my position to Representative Fitzpatrick, who is a leader in pushing legislation in this matter, and he has another engagement, and so I want to yield that to him because I want to make sure he gets his question. So I yield my time to yield my position to Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Very well.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly and Chairman Knight, and also Chairman Shabbat for bringing this important issue to the committee. And our small contractors, as we all know, have endured unfair, one-sided treatment for far too long. And as was referenced, with the help and leadership of both Chairman Knight and Ranking Member Murphy, together we introduced H.R. 2594, the Small Business Payment for Performance Act, which we believe is a common-sense bill which recognizes that cash flow is the lifeblood of small business contractors. So with that being said, I want to open it up to the panel of experts, starting with Mr. Long from NECA, as to what you think this legislation will accomplish and what remains unaccomplished. What steps do we need to take to further close that gap?
Well, anytime that you're going to put something on with that's a bill out there that is going to provide some kind of payment relief, that's a good thing. The fact that change orders are being recognized as an issue and a problem in all sectors, quite frankly, and that would be it'll be helpful in that manner. As again, cash flow is really everything, you know, to our small business. And if you have a $100,000 change order and you have 5% profit on it, that means you have $90,000 out there that you've already spent on that job, on that change order that's not getting approved. That's money out of your working capital. You times that by, you know, 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 change orders, and over the course of 10 or 15 or 20 jobs, you know, we're not going to be able to sustain that. So promptly, what needs to be done still, I would say, if there's anything I could recommend, we need standardized change order protocol. There's a document that Electric put out that is change order guidelines for electrical and low voltage contractors right here. If that was used in creating a standardized change order document, we would take care of a lot of the problems of at least getting to the approval process. Okay? And we still have the issue of timely handling it and payment. So I would say another thing that needs to happen is a time frame that becomes standard as well. You know, a deadline, and there has to be accountability and responsibility with that. In other words, what happens if they don't meet the deadline? You know, there has to be there has to be a hammer. There has to be leverage. There has to be something there to not just go over that deadline. But timely processing of change orders is and receiving fair payment for those change orders. Any legislation that can meet that end is what we're after. Is what I know I'm after.
What consequences would you suggest for delayed payments?
Well, obviously, the best thing for me is I'm not going to keep continuing to do work when I'm not getting paid. So I'm going to stop work. And people, I think entities do not want to see that work stop. But I don't want to see, I want to see payment too. I don't want to see my whole company go away and all of our team, our employees, and that whole company that was referenced earlier that didn't make it. And we're not doing anything wrong. You know, they've asked us to do the change order work. We've priced it fairly. If you follow this document, it's a fair price. Like I said, we're making 5% on a change order, possibly 3 to 5%. So I don't understand what the hangup is with approving that when we've provided the backup and we're continually dealing with no approval. And because there's no hammer, they have to be held accountable, and there has to be, if you don't pay, then we're going to stop work.
I yield back.
Thank you very much. And we'll now go to the ranking member, Ms. Adams, for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Long, small businesses play an important role in the American economy and national security. And so as we continue to try and grow our economy, it's vital that we provide small businesses with necessary opportunities to thrive, to remain in the supply chain, and to maintain our industrial base. If barriers continue to prevent new and existing small businesses from participating in the federal marketplace, such as delays in change orders impacting their bottom line, what will this mean for the industrial base and businesses like yours?
Well, again, our company, I can only speak for our company, and, you know, we won't work if under those conditions, because we would be out of business. When you're performing a service and paying out that labor and materials, subcontractors and equipment, and you're not getting paid,
Okay.
you're not going to be around long. So I would say that we personally, if we find a contract like that, we won't bid it. So we'll just go to other sectors to still remain, you know, a growing company in our community.
Okay, would other members of the panel like to respond? Ms. Brown?
Could you repeat the question real quick?
If barriers continue to prevent new and existing small businesses from participating in the federal marketplace, such as delays in change orders that impact your bottom line, what will this mean for the industrial base and businesses like yours?
Yeah, I think Mr. Long hit it. There's a huge sector with the government contracting that and small business programs that are there to encourage participation and really help startup companies. It would be foolhardy to say that that's the right place to go if you're just starting out. And change orders do become a barrier because you're forced to either proceed with the work or not proceed with the work. And as I kind of alluded in my testimony, we're faced with adverse past performance evaluations or the threat of termination for default. And that doesn't give us a lot of leeway to have any say unless you're prepared to go down that path. It's kind of a buyer beware as you try and enter the government marketplace. But just as the testimony up here earlier, I think one thing that's missing, it's clear in the FAR and in the contract terms that we have time frames by which we're supposed to provide notice and get in pricing. The back half is missing.
Okay.
And it sits there unbeknownst in the process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Adams, may I?
Yes.
Is that when we talk about the industrial base, we too often talk about other than small businesses, but every other than small business was a small business at some point. And if we don't encourage the development and growth of small businesses, we will not have those large businesses for our industrial base in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Brown, what's been the impact of contract modification delays on small business past performance rating?
oftentimes the issues in the past performance, when you get an adverse rating, it's dictated by the morale that was created during the project, and that issue is never identified as being a source of conflict during the course of construction. So it leaves the contractor to reply to the, I would say, misleading or mischaracterization of our performance by having to kind of sling a little mud about what the other side of the story was. And so, but it's in the record, right? And then it's up for other agencies who are reviewing our past performance as to whether they're going to decide, are we qualified enough, or do they want to hire us for the procurement that's in progress?
Thank you. I'm just curious about how change orders impact women and minority-owned construction firms when completing contracts, and do they face any different challenges when they're navigating from this process than their counterparts? If anybody, you've got about 18 seconds.
I think it's a problem for any small and emerging firm. The smaller and less experience you have, the more serious the problem.
Okay. Got 7 minutes, 7
Yeah.
seconds.
Yes,
Sir.
I don't think the change order issues, I don't think sees small business versus large, woman-owned versus emerging. It's universal.
Thank you, sir. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'm now yield 5 minutes to Chairman Kelly for his questions.
As a former small business owner, I know cash flow is the lifeblood of a small business. Even if you're not getting paid what you're worth or what it costs you, to not have that cash flow absolutely forces you to a point of bankruptcy or the inability to honor your obligations to others. So cash flow and timely cash flow is very huge. That being said, Ms. Nelson, as you noted in your testimony, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, FAR, does not define how long the shortest practicable time is for the government to review and request equitable adjustment. In fact, you state an agency like the Army Corps may defer all requests for equitable adjustments until the end of the construction project, likely for funding reasons. Can you talk about how the Small Business Payment for Performance Acts would impact with how agencies like the Army Corps pay out their change orders?
Well, it's really quite simple that if on a unilateral change order, if the Corps of Engineers were to direct a prime contractor to do some extra work, the contractor would be required to submit its request for equitable adjustment within 30 days under the current FAR, and as that prime contractor performed, it could then invoice for up to 50% of the request for equitable adjustment that it submitted to the government. That would prejudice neither the government nor the contractor, but it would keep that cash flowing. Under the Prompt Payment Act, that prime contractor has to pay its subs and suppliers within 7 days of receipt of payment by the government. So it would then make sure that that cash flow went to the lower tiers as well, so that those who need to pay labor, who need to purchase materials to get the government's work done, will have the cash to do it.
And I've spent my whole life fighting for the little guy. It's just kind of, I don't know if it's my Southern DNA or what it is, but a chip on my shoulder. But, you know, I find they use that leverage, and so they know that small businesses have to have that cash flow, just like I talked about initially, and they use that as leverage to make them take less than what they're worth, and also, and the longer they drag it out, the less they'll take, and we've just got to break that thing where they can't do that. My next question is to Mr. Brown. In your testimony, you identify one of the greatest challenges federal contractors face is obtaining timely decisions from federal employees. Could you elaborate on any ideas you might have to motivate the government to act more efficiently and swiftly?
Well, you know, we get the contract thrown at us any chance the agency can. And unfortunately, we don't have much leverage when it comes to getting timely decisions. Even if we're talking about unrelated change orders, maybe just RFIs and submittals. I mean, there's a guideline and a timeline that everybody has to participate in. It's a project, it's a team. So I think the thing that's missing is, with regards to the change order FAR, is a requirement of the timeliness to get the approval. It can't just sit on somebody's desk. We can't just be told it's going through the process. We're requesting prior year funds. As a small business, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's true. I go talk to another VA employee, and that's not the answer I get. So it's hard to figure out what's really going on, and you're trying to just develop some trust and rapport, and I'm taking it on face value. But not until I, send an email up to headquarters does the tree get rattled. I can't do that every day, right? So I hope that answers your question, give you.
It does, and I guess one of the things is people have to have skin in the game, and there's got to be some personal accountability of those government employees so that it costs them, not the agency, it costs them something for bad acts or acts of bad conduct or bad faith. And I don't know what the right answer is, but I know this: if people aren't held personally accountable, and it's some big bureaucracy, they don't have that sense of urgency which is required. And trust me, our small businesses, each and every one, unless they're a whole lot more fortunate than I was and a lot better businessmen, those cash flow and timeliness of that cash flow is just such an urgent. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I think that says a lot right there. We're going to go to Mr. Lawson, the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Health and Technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you all for being here. And I don't know a lot about this particular area, and so I'm going to need your help because I would like to be able to help you all. When you're building a house and there's a change order, the contractor normally inform you, like your wife said, she wants pellet windows and like the windows that were being bidded on. And so as a result, then you go back to talk to the bank and said, we're going to need a little bit more money in order to do it. In a situation where you all are involved in, who determines the change order? Is it the agency that determines the change order? And when they say that we want different kind of fixtures now in our restrooms, better access for handicap and so forth like that, at that point, do you start to talk dollars with them? Or what really happens, which I don't quite understand, because I know cash flow is. I've been in business for 36 years, but we didn't have change order in the insurance business. So, so I have to understand a little bit better about the contract, and maybe some of you all can kind of enlighten me. What happens when this occurs?
I'll link to that. In construction, there's really three scenarios that kind of give rise to a change order. One's the one where the agency requests a change. We want a bigger space or a new door or a different type of window. The other is if there's a differing site condition. We encounter something typically subsurface that we didn't anticipate. There's a sewer line that wasn't noted on the drawings. We've got to deal with it. Or there's conflicts within the drawings. Drawings and specs aren't accurate. And as we're getting out into the field, what's drawn on paper isn't really working in the field. And those give rise to change orders when we have to change the course of action or the fix.
And if I may follow up, Mr. Chairman, then how does the agency start to handle that? When you see those things that didn't appear on the specs, and it's going to be $10,000, $15,000 more to be able to fix it correctly. How long does it take the agency to really determine whether they're going to give you the resources that you need in order to be able to do it?
Well, this is the consistently inconsistent part. It varies from project teams, both government and the contractor side. Some will acknowledge, yep, this is a change, and we'll go down the change order place. They'll say, hey, the agency will issue us an RFP. Here's how we want you to change it, price it, we negotiate it, and we move forward. Other times, they'll want to dispute the entitlement of the change order.
Wow.
And they'll try and find different ways within the contract or a clause in the specs and play that kind of game, which only delays the project. And then once the change order finally comes to fruition, your $20,000 change order became 40 or 60 because of the delay, and there's really no added value on that additional $20,000 to $40,000. There's nothing, right? Building didn't get any bigger, and as a change order, we don't make any money in change orders. Mr. Long alluded to that. We're recovering costs at that time, costs. And if we settle for anything less, we're settling for 30 cents on the dollar. Or if they tell us, hey, if it's really egregious, they'll just say, hey, why don't you file a claim and we'll put you, you can go access money from the judgment fund. And that's been a common response that we've received as a small business.
At that point, and then you can talk, Ms. Nelson, what do you do with the subs?
We hold hands. I mean, you know, it depends. We'll get subcontractor pricing, and then depending on, as a prime, we'll just case by case basis, and depending how many other projects we have a similar, we'll fund it ourselves, or we'll split it and try and give enough cash to the subcontractor to keep them going. Because the worst thing would happen is they pull off the job. We don't want that, or they go out of business, and then the cost to the contractor becomes greater to find a replacement contractor. So it's a dance.
Representative Larson, on that Aurora, Colorado project, the prime contractor was very large. It was a joint venture between two very large companies. And what it decided to do in that case was pay millions of dollars to various small individual companies, service-disabled companies, 8A companies, to prevent them from filing bankruptcy, because those companies could not finance carrying on the work. They had to be paid in some way. So luckily, the prime in that case had the wherewithal to pay them, or it would have been all over. For that, 2 companies filed bankruptcy out of 33, he'd have had them all go down. But the prime stepped up.
Well, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. And we're going to take one more. We are voting, but we got a little bit of time, so we'll go to Mr. Bacon for his questions.
Thank you to both chairmen and to our ranking members. I appreciate y'all being here today. I heard really loud and clear during our campaign, and when I get back to the district, that small businesses are struggling with getting their contracts and with government, delayed payments, the rescinded orders or the change orders like you've already mentioned, and so forth, lack of transparency. And so we worked with a variety of folks to put this bill together called Know Before You Bid. So I want to thank Mr. Long for your support today during testimony. I just wanted to ask if the other 3 may have had a chance to read it. Love to have your feedback on this bill. And I know with Mr. Fitzpatrick also submitting a bill, what else do we need to do? What can we do to better support the small business team with contracts of government?
Mr. Bacon, the members of the coalition all support the bill as introduced.
Thank you. It's great to hear that. What other work do we need to do then? Is there another bill here that we need to work on, or what's some other target areas that we should be focusing on?
I outlined in my written testimony 4 proposals, including yours, but I'd like to expand on one of those items. Mr. Fitzpatrick had asked, what's the enforcement mechanism that if you establish a time frame, as we've recommended, for when the government must approve a request for equitable adjustment, how does one enforce that? And my response would be 2 options. The option that the contractors might prefer is that if the government doesn't respond in a timely manner, the request for equitable adjustment is automatically approved. Okay. As a taxpayer, I might suggest that another alternative would be that if the contracting officer does not respond in a timely manner, that the request for equitable adjustment is automatically denied. That allows the contractor to file a claim if it chooses to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from our panel?
Very quickly, one of the issues I think that still needs to be tackled is this issue of creating a dispute where one does not exist, and Mr. Brown made reference to it. I mean, these construction contracts are 3 and 4 inches thick, and if the government wants to find a dispute in there somewhere, it can. And the problem is when it does find a dispute, it can just simply deny a change order, which could very well be legitimate, and obviously so. So I think one thing to think about in terms of moving forward is how can we create a resolution process that's quicker than what the contractor has available to him now. Because what's available to him now is filing a claim, waiting 60 days, having that claim denied, appealing that denial, and going through a very long protracted litigation process. There needs to be some different mechanism, a better mechanism in place to assist the contractor through that type of problem.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And we're going to go to Ms. Clark, and you can wrap this whole thing together and figure everything out in 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm afraid it looks like it's going to take a bit more time from all of us to sort this thing through. I want to thank all of our witnesses for testifying here this morning. This has been a pretty vexing problem for quite some time. As a New Yorker, I travel across a Brooklyn Bridge that looks like it's suffering from change order-itis. Mr. Delisle, in your testimony, you gave an example of a contracting officer that had a practice of issuing unilateral change orders for 10% of the value claimed for the additional work. With agencies having so much control in the contract modification process, how can we reverse this trend?
Well, I think as we've discussed this morning, Congressman Fitzpatrick's bill would certainly assist in doing that, because it wouldn't be 10% that the contracting officer would be justifying, if you will, upfront. It'd be 50. Okay, so there would be more cash flow for the contractor. So I think that would certainly help. It's a big part. Cash flow is a big part of the problem.
And then just to the panel, the current contract modification process is causing anxiety among small business contractors, and in some cases inhibiting them from participating in the federal marketplace. In your opinion, what is the #1 challenge that small businesses in your industry are facing when it comes to using the change order process? The #1.
Cash flow, and cash flow.
Yeah, the position we're being put in right now is not one that I don't think we should be responsible for. We're not a bank. And that's the position that we're all being put in. We are being put in the position of the bank. We're financing these jobs. And that's the easiest way to explain it, you know. Yeah.
I guess part of the cash flow is time, right? So in our world, time is money. Our proposals and our costs are based on time. So the sooner we can close the change order negotiation, the better off we are, and it'll help with the cash flow. But cash flow is king.
For sure. One of the other issues, and Mr. Brown just mentioned it, is the time factor. If the government is held to strict accountability in terms of how long it has to resolve these change order issues, it would go a long way for sure.
Very well, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much. I think this has been a robust committee hearing. You've already heard 2 pieces of legislation that have come out of this. I would expect we're going to see more. We're going to be continuing to talk about this because it affects every district in every state, with every subcontractor and every small business across the country. We've heard it, that cash is the issue, and that is for a small business. Your biggest assets are your employees and how much money you can leverage, whether you have it or you can get it. And if it's all out, then there's problems. And so we always like to see small businesses bringing more money in than putting out. And so you will see more ideas and more pieces of legislation coming out of small business, but we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we are, hang on. I always have smart people next to me. All right, I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Every member hear that? Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you very much. Just in
Okay.
time for votes.